beneficial. We know metal goods are goods that are beneficial for the consumers, but they underestimate the benefit and therefore they underconsume, right? Now, have a look at this. So, right? So you have, sorry about that, right? So you have this thing where you have downward sloping demand curve, right? So this is the demand curve. You have price on the y-axis, you have quantity of the good on the x-axis. Okay, so normal downward sloping is your demand curve, right? Now, in this, we will need to make a distinction. So this is the market demand. This is the market demand, right? So let's say first we are talking about metal goods. So first, let's look at the graph of the metal good. So did you get the definition? So what is the definition of merit good? Anything that is beneficial for consumers, but they underestimate the benefits. That's why they underconsume. So ideal example of this could be education, healthcare, right? Not many people, even if you think of the vaccination that the government was conducting, right? Not a lot of people were comfortable getting themselves vaccinated because they had reservations that whether it's fine, and all that stuff, right? So this is the demand by the market. DM means the demand by the market, what people are currently demanding. So let's say, what is the demand by the people for vaccination in Pakistan or any other country? Whereas from society's point of view, the demand curve would be higher. So this is DS, demand that is socially desirable. Demand that is socially desirable. Are you getting me, students? Okay. Now, where is the market consuming? The market is consuming, have a look at this. The market will consume this much quantity where the demand curve for market is cutting with the supply curve. So this is the quantity that the market will demand. Whereas what is socially desirable quantity? So socially desirable quantity is at QS. Socially desirable quantity is at QS. So you are under consuming. What are you doing? You are under consuming. Society is under consuming. Now, what is the solution for this? Isha, so what is the solution available to the government to correct this underconsumption? So for that, the government will provide subsidies. Either the government can create awareness, which means automatically, which the government was doing in Pakistan as well, that the government can create awareness and encourage people to get themselves vaccinated. So automatically the demand curve will shift from DM to DS. Or another way would be to just provide subsidies on vaccination. Right now they are free, right? So that will cause the supply curve to shift to the right. Right? So there are two ways. One is create awareness, and you can increase the demand by the people themselves to encourage people to get themselves vaccinated, create awareness to encourage people to get vaccinated. So that will automatically, right? That will cause the demand curve to shift to the right. Or another way around that, provide subsidies. Any confusion so far? Are we good? Okay, now this was merit good. Now let's look at the demerit good. Now the idea with the demerit good is completely opposite. Anything that's harmful for the consumers, but they do not fully realize the harmful effect, right? Okay, now they do not fully realize the harmful effects. Okay, now this is your, again, you will have price on the y-axis, excuse me, and you will have quantity of the good on the x-axis. What could be a demerit good? Smoking, ideal example, alcohol, right? So all these things are harmful for the consumers, but they don't fully realize its harmful effects. So again, we look at two things. This is the demand of the market, DM, where the market is demanding, right? And let's say this is the supply, a normal upward sloping supply, which shows how much is the quantity produced. So normal upward sloping is the supply. Okay, now ideally the society should have demanded less. Ideally, the society should have demanded less. So DS is lower than DM. DS is lower than DM. Yes or no? Now, where's the market consuming at the moment? So market is consuming where DM is intersecting with the supply. So it is consuming at this level. So it is consuming, market is consuming at this level. So this is quantity by the market. Whereas where it should have been, so where is DS, socially desirable demand is equal to supply, and that is this point, and that is this point. So socially desirable quantity is less. Social desirable quantity is less. So you have to bring QM where the market is consuming down to QS. And what can you do for that? Isha, what can the government do to correct this? Yeah, taxes, excellent. So the government will impose taxes. And when the government impose taxes, have a look at this. So the best way to make this accurately is to take this up, and the government will impose taxes to the extent where your supply curve shifts backward to this level, right? So it shifts from S1 to S2. And now you can see for yourself that the new supply curve is intersecting with your socially desirable demand at this level. So your prices will increase and automatically the consumption would come down. Automatically the consumption would come down, right? So that's the thing. This is demand good. Now, do you also want me to do the negative and positive externalities, or are you good with that? Negative and positive externalities. Yeah. Okay. So, right, perfect. So do you have any other question? Yeah. So if this is all, then we can go and do, some essay questions. Okay, great, perfect. So let's go and do some. Let's choose a little older paper because, that would give us a good idea of, let's say we do March 2017. Okay, now we did do the case study, right? In fact, we were doing the case study, right? Um, okay, so do you want me to continue with the case study, or we can do the essay questions? Which of two do you want me to do? While we're writing on the market failure, we will mention the changes in supply, like in this example of merit goods. No, no. Okay, yes, yes, yes. So if the government, yeah, I get it. Yes, yes, obviously. So think about this. Now there can be two types of questions. I got your question. So either the question is talking about how the government corrects market failure, or they're just asking why the market failure happens. So if they're asking why the market failure happens, then your definition would be good enough that in the case of merit goods, people underestimate the benefit, therefore they underconsume. And in the case of demerit goods, they underestimate the harmful effects, so they overconsume, right? So for that question, you just need to write to this extent because it's not asking you how market failure is corrected. However, in the other question where it asks you that how is that corrected, then you have to talk about that. Then you have to talk about that. Easy? Are we good? Right? Okay. Now let's do some essay questions. So you can choose anyone. Right. Yeah. 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 So even if you do, it will not take you a lot of time. Even if you do, in both the questions, even if you explain how the government will solve the problem, it will not take you a lot of time. Just write in 1 or 2 lines that the government will impose taxes in the case of demerit goods, so that to increase the price of that product and discourage consumption. And in the case of merit goods, the government will give subsidies to make it cheaper for the people to afford so that they can consume more. So one liner would be enough, and you can just quickly show the changes in the supply. So even if you do, that should not be a problem, right? Okay, now let's read through the essay questions, and then we can discuss. We can see which of these we need to attempt. Explain what is meant by economic theory by consumer equilibrium, right? Uh, what is meant in economic theory by consumer equilibrium, right? Question 4. Okay, great. That was quick. A politician remarked that the absence of trade unions would necessarily lead to an improvement in all labor markets. To what extent does economic analysis support this remark? Right. Yeah, sure. So question 6 is saying, consider how significant the level of income is in determining people demand for money according to liquidity preference theory. And the B part says, discuss whether increase in national income of a country is a reliable indicator of improvement in the standard of living for the people in that country. So yeah. So what do you think? Which of the two should we do? Yeah. Okay, just give me a second. So, okay. Okay, four. Let's do four. Okay. Now the question is saying, a politician remarked that the absence of trade unions would necessarily lead to an improvement in non-labor markets. To what extent does economic analysis support this remark, right? So I think that in this question, we need to start off by telling that what are labor markets and then what are competitive or perfect labor markets where there are no trade unions and there are no trade unions, there's no government intervention and stuff like that. So let me tell you, right? So I think in this question, what you need to do is to first talk about, briefly tell what a labor market is. Market where, the wages of laborers is determined, and labor market is made up of two groups, just like any other market. One is of the employers. One side of the labor market is the employers who are demanding labor, companies and employers who want to hire people to get their work done. And the other side of the market is the workers themselves who are determining the supply, because they are willing to work, they have to supply their labor services, just like I work with Mega Lecture to, to earn income and so on, right? So I'm the one who is supplying the labor, and employers like Mega Lecture are the ones who are demanding labor. So in this question, I think first of all, you will give some overview, then you explain what is demand for labor, similarly what is supply of labor, then you'll talk about that there are perfect labor markets where there are no there's no government intervention, there are no trade unions, and so on and so forth, right? And then you will give a little bit of an overview of what is an imperfect labor market where you have trade unions and you have government intervention and you have monopsony, right? And then towards the end, you will talk about the statement that if trade unions are restricted, if trade unions are not involved in the labor market, how will that improve the labor market? Are you getting me? Then you have to, in the end, talk about that what exactly is trade union, how that operates, and why removal of trade union would be a good thing. How removal of trade union would be a good thing, right? Are you getting me? Let's read the question one more time. A politician remarked that the absence of trade unions would necessarily lead to an improvement in all labor markets. To what extent economic analysis support this remark, right? So let's quickly look at the marking scheme to see whether it is covering all the points that we have discussed or there are some additional points. Okay. Analysis of wage determination and employment levels. Just like I said, that you have to talk about what is demand for labor, what is supply for labor, and how wages are determined. Consideration of perfect and imperfect markets, as I said, discussion of meaning of improvement, right? Now that is interesting. What does improvement mean? Improvement, one form of improvement could be that trade unions influence wages. How do they influence wages? Because they restrict labor supply, they go on strikes, industrial action, the entire concept of industrial action, you would remember. If you don't remember, I can write it down over here. Think about this. So what are trade unions? Trade unions, or labor unions, as we say, are platforms or organizations that represents workers in any particular industry or any particular firm, right? Now, the purpose of trade union is to negotiate better working conditions and better wages and all that stuff for the members, right? Now, how do trade unions operate? So trade unions try to put their demands in front of employers, and if their demands are not accepted, then trade unions are willing to take industrial action. Then trade unions are willing to take industrial action. And how do they take these industrial action? They will go on protest, they will go on strike and things like that, right? And that puts pressure on the employer to accept their demands. So they will go on strikes, they will go on protests, right? Then there's a few other ways through which they put pressure on the companies, on the employers. Like they can also adopt a strategy of go slow. Now, what is go slow? That they will not be working efficiently or productively. Workers are deliberately slowing down the process and all that stuff to put pressure. And with all these things happening, the firm will be under pressure to accept their demands, right? Is this making sense? Isha, is all of this making sense? So you'll explain how trade unions do that. And when you remove trade unions' presence, like in most cases in Pakistan, there are no trade unions, right? So every person has to go and negotiate their wages or to negotiate, they will directly negotiate their wages or working conditions with the employer, which means the company that they're working at. So in that case, there will be, as it says, in what improvement levels, wages and productivity, efficiency of the firm, safety issues for workers, employers, general public, right? So you have to talk about from all perspectives. Now let's talk about some pros and cons of um, of labor unions, right? So think about this. After you've explained all the process, then you can say if there will be improvement due to removal of trade union, would there be improvement in the labor market or would there not be improvement, right? Right? That is basically the main argument that the question wants you to do. So on the left hand side, we'll present all the arguments which makes us think that labor union removal will, labor union over here we're talking about, labor union removal will bring improvement in the labor market. Labor union removal will be beneficial. So on the left hand side, that is what we're discussing. And on the right hand side, we're discussing labor union removal will not be beneficial. Is this making sense? Removal will not be beneficial, right? Is this clear? Okay, now, great, perfect. Now let's talk about, you tell me that why do you think removal will be beneficial? Let's talk about that. How will removal be beneficial? What do you think? How will removal be beneficial? Any argument that is coming to your mind? So first thing that you need to know, is think about this. When the government, as I'm sorry, not the government, when the trade union, when they use all these different approaches, like they go on strike. Now, what is strike? Strike means that they're not showing to workplace. Hartal jisko hum kehte hain, Urdu mein hartal, right? So when labor union has gone to strike, which means that they have asked all of their members to not go to work and not to work and so on, right? So that will directly affect the output. Lesser output for the economy, right? Because just imagine if auto workers are on a strike, then no cars will be produced during that time, right? Lesser output for the country, which means lower GDP, right? That is one major disadvantage. So removal will be beneficial in this case. That's what I'm trying to say over here. Similarly, another thing is that these people, when you are on strike, obviously these people will not be getting their wages. The workers will not be getting their wages, and in that case, they will be at a disadvantage. Workers will not be getting wages. So if you stop, if you restrict trade unions, that will be beneficial for the economy and for the workers as well, because at least when they're working, they're getting wages. When they're on a strike or they're on a protest, they will not be getting their wages. So are you getting me? Workers will not be getting wages, and that's a disadvantage. So we are making the case that labor unions should be banned, should be restricted or banned, or whatever you want to call that. Okay, another thing, can damage public property. Are you getting me? So a lot of times when these unions are very powerful, and they're going on a strike and things like that, so just to create more pressure on the government and on their companies, they want to, sometimes these protests are not peaceful. You do understand what a peaceful protest is, right? So peaceful protest is when you're just, or peaceful strike is when you're not showing to workplace, when you're just sitting at one place and you're just getting your, getting your demands registered, getting your demands registered with the government organization or the employer, or you are showing this up on the media of the country to let the world know that you are being treated unfairly. But if it gets violent, if the strike or the protest gets violent, then that is a big challenge, right? So that is again something that is harmful for the country, and therefore trade unions should be restricted. They should not be let to operate freely, right? But in what cases would it not be any improvement? Because think about this, labor unions at the end of the day are working for the workers. So higher wages, if they are able to negotiate higher wages and better working conditions, that would be beneficial for the workers. Higher wages and better working conditions will be beneficial for the workers. Do you agree with me? Better working conditions will be beneficial for workers. This is making sense. Any confusion? Okay, what else? How else trade unions are beneficial? What do you think? Any idea? Right? Another thing that you need to know is that a single worker, an individual. So think about this. An individual is not powerful. So if an individual worker goes to the company and says that, I'm putting in so much effort and I need more wages and so on and so forth, that person has absolutely no bargaining power. But when you go as a group, that is when your bargaining power increases. An individual has no bargaining power against a big company. Isha, are you following all of this? Has no bargaining power against a well-established company. And in some cases, the companies can even lay them off for not accepting the wages or not accepting the conditions that are being provided. So they can even lay them off, get them fired or something against big employers, right? But when you go as a trade union, when you go as a group, then you have more bargaining power, which means that the company that means that the company cannot be unfair to their workers, right? So that is another thing. Then another thing again, over here we said that removal of trade unions would bring improvement. And over here we said on this end, we are saying that improvement would happen if you restrict trade unions. And on the right column, we are saying that removal of trade union would not be an improvement, right? Okay, then another reason why trade unions should not be banned is that workers have right to ask for better wages and working conditions, right? Just like any other human being, to ask for, do you agree with me? Ask for better wages and working conditions. So these are some of the things that you need to remember, right? Okay, and this is all what you need to write in this question. So first of all, let's do a quick recap. Let's look at the question one more time, and then we'll do a recap and then move to the next question. So the question over here was saying, have a look at this. A politician remarked that the absence of trade unions would necessarily lead to an improvement in labor market. To what extent does economic analysis support this remark? 25 marks. So for this question, I said that you start off by answering. First of all, you tell what labor market is. That just like any other market, you have market for labor services where you have two groups: employers who are determining the demand for the labor, who are willing to hire people, and then you have workers who are willing to supply supply their labor services. Right now, within labor market, you have two types: perfect labor market and imperfect labor market. In perfect labor market, there's no government intervention, there's no trade union. There are a lot of firms that are willing to hire labor, and there are a lot of people who are willing to work. and labor is homogeneous. What does homogeneous means? That majority people have the same skill set, right? So if Qasim Shamim is not teaching on mega lecture, you can hire some other teacher and he or she would be equally good as Qasim Shamim. But in imperfect labor markets, none of this holds true. There are few firms, perhaps it can be a monopoly, monopsony. In monopsony, we know there's only one company that is, or one major firm that is in the position of hiring someone, right? So either it can be a monopsony or in imperfect labor market, there will be what is that called? There will be, the labor is not homogeneous, so we don't all have the same skill set. Then there is presence of labor trade unions in imperfect labor markets. There is presence of trade unions and there's government intervention like minimum wages and all that. After you explain that, then you will say that how trade unions actually operate. Trade unions operate through creating pressure on the employees. How do they do that? They go on a strike if the demands are not met, or they go on protest, they go slow, they adopt other strategies to put pressure on the government, right? Then another thing for knowing is, then you come to the main side of the argument and talk about whether improvement would take place if trade unions activities are restricted, or would there not be an improvement. So for improvement, we said lesser output for the country because of the go on strike. Obviously, they will not be producing, which means less GDP. Workers will not be getting their wages, so that is again unfair. Can damage public property, that is again a problem, and can give trade unions unnecessary powers or too much powers. That's another point that I just thought of. Can give labor union LU too much powers, because sometimes we see back in the day, not nowadays, that labor unions and trade unions, these parties used to be very powerful and they're always trying to create some nonsense and so on, and they can even get involved in political activities, right? Like otherwise their work was just to protect the rights of the workers, but they can be so powerful that they're taking part in political campaigns and political activities, which is definitely harmful for the country. On the other hand side of the argument, you have to talk about how banning of labor unions is not a good thing. So you are making the case that you should not ban labor unions. Why so? Higher wages and better working conditions will be beneficial for workers. Obviously, their living standards will improve. They will spend more. There will be more growth in the country and all that stuff. An individual has no bargaining power against big companies. Again, that's a disadvantage. Like that means that laborers are at a disadvantage, so they should be given more power, and then workers should have a right to ask for better wages and working conditions. And then in the end, you can conclude by putting your own argument or your own opinion in conclusion, that whether you think that trade unions should be banned completely or should their activities be restricted, and so on. So for this question, I would have said that trade unions should not be completely banned, because everyone has a right, and workers also have a right to ask for better wages and working conditions. But sometimes when they get too much powerful, they can create unnecessary nuisance in the country, and therefore their activities should be restricted. So they should not be given a free hand to do whatever they want to. Their activities should be restricted or controlled. Does it make sense, Isha? So this is all what you need to write for a 25 marks question. Any other question out of these? We can quickly do one more question. We can quickly do one more question if you want me to. Yeah. Okay, so, okay, perfect. Okay, fine. No problem. So we'll continue from here in the next class and see you at the same time. Okay, now quickly one question. Do you want me to reverse the timings? Because I just realized our A2 class used to happen before AS. So do you want me to have your class at 7 or in the second half? Which of do you go? Right. Okay, so you are saying that if we move the class to the original time, which is, okay, 7 to 7:45. Is that what you're saying? Okay, so I'll move the A2 class. In fact, that is the official time. I don't know, I got confused. But yeah, from tomorrow we'll have a class from 7 to 7:45. Great. So I'll see you then. Take care. Allah Hafiz.